By the time the sheriff walked up the sandy path to my grandmother's cottage on Christmas Eve, my mother had already hung stockings over the fireplace, and my brother had his boots propped on the coffee table like he owned the place. That was the moment I became the woman who had her own family removed from a house by law enforcement. Not for revenge in the movie sense, not for drama, but because I finally understood that if I did not defend myself, no one would. I stood in the doorway that day with the cold Atlantic wind at my back and the smell of cinnamon and fraud in the air. My mother was stringing lights, humming along to a Christmas carol, acting like she had not broken into a home that was legally mine. My older brother Dylan had already dragged a suitcase into the bedroom my grandmother used to sleep in, the one with the faded quilt and the view of the water. "You are late," my mother said, like I had kept her waiting at brunch. "We thought you would be here earlier. There is so much to do before dinner." I stared at her. "You do not live here," I said. "Neither of you lives here. You are trespassing." Dylan laughed low and mean. "Here we go," he muttered. "Princess Olivia, with her big city condo and her little nurse practitioner job, suddenly thinks she is some kind of judge." My mother turned one hand on her hip, the other still holding a strand of lights. "Your grandmother wanted this cottage for family," she said, "for all of us. She did not raise you to be this selfish." My heart pounded against my ribs. I could feel the weight of my key in my pocket, the same key I had used for years visiting my grandmother, walking these same floors, listening to the waves against the pier. I also felt the weight of the court order in my bag, the one that said in neat official language that the cottage on Seaglass Lane belonged to me and only me. My name is Olivia Carter. When this started, I was in my early 30s and still believed that if you loved your family enough, they would eventually love you back in the way you needed. I did not understand yet that some people only love what you can provide. I will tell you exactly how I went from being the reliable daughter who held everyone together to the woman standing in the doorway of her grandmother's cottage calling the sheriff on her own mother and brother a few hours before Christmas dinner. But to understand why I did it, you have to know what happened the Thanksgiving before, and the birthday my family forgot, and the hidden will that was supposed to change everything. Because this is not just a story about property or documents. This is a story about betrayal, inheritance, revenge, and the kind of family drama that looks ordinary from the outside until the tables finally turn. I grew up in a small town on the Carolina coast, where the salt air rusted everything and gossip traveled faster than any storm. Our house was a tired ranch on a street of other tired ranches, sagging fences and patchy lawns that told you exactly how much money lived inside. My mother Sharon ran a bridal boutique on Main Street, which sounds more glamorous than it was. The shop was cramped and smelled like body spray and steamed fabric. Brides came in clutching photos of shimmering gowns they found online, and my mother tried to talk them into whatever she had on clearance. She called it a family business even though the only consistent employee was me. Dylan was the golden child from the moment he arrived. He was the firstborn, the first grandson, the first everything. My parents had framed photos of his Pee-wee trophies and his crooked kindergarten drawings on every wall. When he skipped homework or got detention, my mother said boys would be boys. When he crashed a borrowed car in high school, she said it was the other kid's fault for driving something so fragile. I was the middle child, the girl who made straight A's and packed her own lunches. My younger sister Erin came 3 years after me, soft-eyed and anxious, always trying to soothe whatever storm my parents and brother stirred up. My father Tim worked on fishing boats, which meant he was gone more than he was home, and when he was home he smelled like diesel and cigarettes and kept the television turned up too loud. If there was one place in town that felt like mine, it was my grandmother's cottage on Seaglass Lane. Grandma Margaret's place did not look like a mansion to anyone else. It was small and a little crooked with clapboard siding, blue shutters, and a porch that groaned when you walked across it. To me, it felt like everything good about the world had pooled into that one little house by the water. She kept the front door painted a stubborn shade of teal. She baked cornbread in a cast-iron skillet older than anyone in the family. She remembered every birthday and never forgot which grandchild liked chocolate cake and which one preferred lemon. When Thanksgiving dinner at my parents' house turned into a shouting match about who had not called, who had not visited, who had not sent money, Grandma's cottage was where I ran when the noise got too loud. "You are my steady girl," she would say, rubbing small circles on my back as we sat on the porch swing together. "You see what people are really doing, not just what they say they are doing." She was the one who slipped me cash for school supplies when my parents said they were broke, but somehow found money for Dylan's new sneakers. She was the one who looked me in the eye at my high school graduation dinner and said, "You go as far as you want, Liv. Do not let this town or our little family circus keep you small." She knew about the favoritism, the manipulation, the way my mother used guilt like a language. She never badmouthed them, but she never gaslit me either. Where my parents promised and forgot, she followed through. Where they used the word family like a leash, she used it like a blanket. I did not know then that one day her name would be at the center of a legal battle, that the words inheritance will excluded and judge would rewire everything I thought I knew about loyalty and love. Back then, she was just my grandmother, the one person who never made me earn my place at the table. I worked my way out of that town with a stubbornness that probably came from Grandma more than anyone. While Dylan bounced between half-hearted attempts at community college and whatever business idea he was pitching that month, I studied. I took the longest shifts at the bridal shop, saved tips from frazzled mothers of the bride, and stacked them next to my financial aid letters. I left for nursing school in Raleigh with a duffel bag, a second-hand laptop, and the firm belief that once I had a career, once I could take care of everyone, the old resentments would melt. I thought success would be the cure for our toxic family, that if I could earn enough, no one would have to fight over bills. I became a nurse, then pushed through more schooling until I was a nurse practitioner. I liked the work most days. I liked listening to people putting the hidden truth of their symptoms together like a puzzle. I liked feeling competent, necessary. The money was better than anything my parents had ever made, but it came with a cost. I worked long hours in a busy clinic, often staying late to finish charting, while the cleaning crew vacuumed around my feet. I was the first person to show up and the last one to leave, always volunteering to cover for someone with kids. "You do not have a family yet," my supervisor would say, as if my parents and siblings did not count. But of course, to my family, I always counted, especially when a bill came due. My mother called whenever the shop was slow. "Rent is killing me," she would say. "You know this town. It is hard on small business. I just need a little help to get through this month." Dylan called whenever one of his big ideas collapsed. "The investors pulled out," he would say. "If I could just keep this going another month, I know it would turn around. You would not want to see your own brother fail, would you?" My father rarely called, but when he did, it was about medical bills for some injury he had ignored until it was an emergency. Erin called too, but always apologizing. "I hate to ask," she would whisper. "Mom will be furious if she finds out I came to you. I just do not know what else to do." Year after year, I wired money. I paid past due electric bills. I covered my mother's shop insurance so she would not lose her lease. I paid for Dylan's car to be repaired after his latest accident. I sent Erin money when her boyfriend walked out and left her with rent she could not afford. Every time they reminded me I was single, childless, with a good job in healthcare. Every time they framed it as family helping family, not favoritism, not exploitation. On my 30th birthday, I finished a 12-hour shift and walked into my apartment with my scrubs still smelling like antiseptic and coffee. My phone was full of notifications from patients and coworkers, but there was nothing from my parents. Not a call, not a text. Grandma was the only one who remembered. My grandmother's voice on my voicemail sang a slightly off-key birthday song that made my chest ache. Later that night, Dylan called about a short-term loan he needed for a new venture. He never mentioned my birthday. I gave him the money anyway. The injustice registered as a small sharp stone in my chest, but I swallowed it like I had swallowed every other slight. I told myself this is what good daughters do. They show up, they help, they stay loyal no matter how many times their own needs are forgotten. I did not know that someday, that same loyalty would be used to trick me into signing away everything my grandmother meant to give me. The call about Grandma came on a humid June afternoon when the clinic air conditioner was losing the battle against the heat. I was standing in an exam room explaining blood pressure medication to a patient when my phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it until I saw Erin's name flash across the screen 3 times in a row. I stepped into the hallway and called her back. Her voice was thin and shaky, Liv, it is Grandma, she said. She collapsed on the porch. The neighbor called an ambulance. They think it was a stroke. By the time I got to the hospital near our hometown, Grandma was in a room in the neurological wing, hooked up to monitors that beeped in a steady rhythm that did not match the frantic thudding of my heart. Her face drooped slightly on one side, her words came out slow and slurred, but her eyes were clear when they found mine. "There is my steady girl," she whispered, squeezing my hand with surprising strength. My mother stood in this corner, arms crossed, tight eyes rimmed red but dry. My father leaned against the wall, looking smaller than I remembered. Dylan was nowhere to be seen, which did not surprise me. The doctors said the word they always say when they do not want to promise anything: wait. Wait and see what function she regained. Wait and see if she would walk again. Wait and see if her speech improved. What they did not say was, who would do the waiting? Who would sit by her bed? Who would manage the medications, the follow-up appointments, the home care? My mother did not hesitate. She turned to me. "You work in healthcare," she said. "You understand all this. You are the one who should handle it." I lived 3 hours away in a city where I rented a small apartment and had finally found a routine that was not centered around rescue missions for my family. But when I looked at Grandma, fear in her eyes and gratitude when I adjusted her pillow, I knew I could not walk away. So I took leave from my job. I moved into the cottage on Seaglass Lane, sleeping in the small guest room, and waking at odd hours to help her to the bathroom, to check her blood pressure, to coax her into eating. The smell of the ocean mixed with the scent of antiseptic wipes and laundry detergent. It was hard, beautiful, exhausting work. There were days when she seemed almost like herself, making dry jokes about the physical therapist, asking about my patients, talking about the Thanksgiving dinner she wanted to host that year, even if she had to do it from a wheelchair. There were days when she cried out in confusion and called me by my mother's name, then apologized when she realized. "You should be out living your life," she would say, tracing the edge of the quilt. "You should be going on dates, getting promotions, not watching me learn how to use a walker." "Taking care of you is part of my life," I would answer. "You took care of me for years. This is just the tables turned." Sometimes when she was tired and the house was quiet, she would talk about the cottage, how she had bought it with my grandfather before I was born, how they had dreamed of their grandchildren running down to the pier with fishing nets and sunburnt noses. "This place needs someone who loves it," she said one evening, as the light turned gold through the windows. "Someone who understands it is more than wood and paint." I thought she was just reminiscing, weaving the kind of stories older people like to tell when they feel time pressing in. I did not know she had already made concrete plans about the inheritance, about the will, about me. I only knew that the more time I spent at the cottage, the more it felt like home in a way my apartment never had. Grandma died on a cold morning in November, a few weeks before Thanksgiving dinner. I was at the kitchen table measuring out her medications when I realized the house was too quiet. I found her in her bed, her face peaceful, her hands resting on top of the quilt she loved. The monitors had been gone for months by then. Her heart had simply decided it was time to stop. Grief can be loud, but mine was silent. I sat on the floor beside her bed and leaned my forehead against the mattress, my tears soaking into the fabric. I thought of every night I had tucked her and every story she had told about my grandfather, every time she had called me her steady girl. My mother cried in the hospital when the nurse delivered the news. She wailed at the funeral, clutched a tissue at the graveside, accepted sympathy from every person in town. It all felt a bit like one of the performances she put on in the bridal shop, but I tried to give her grace. People grieve however they can. A few days after the funeral, Grandma's lawyer called. He wanted us to come in for the reading of the will. The word inheritance made my stomach twist. I had not thought much about money or property. I was too busy thinking about the empty chair at the porch table, the quiet spaces where her voice used to be. We sat in a narrow conference room at the back of a brick building downtown. My mother in a dark dress, my father in a suit that did not fit quite right, Dylan in a collared shirt he had clearly borrowed from someone skinnier. Erin sat next to me, twisting a tissue in her hands. The lawyer, Mr. Harlan, was an older man with a trimmed beard and a tired kindness in his eyes. He put on a pair of reading glasses and slipped a folder out of his briefcase. "Margaret kept things fairly simple," he said. "She believed in clarity." He read a few small bequests first, some jewelry to a cousin, a donation to the church. Then he cleared his throat and read the part that changed everything. To my granddaughter, Olivia Carter, who has shown me steadfast love and care. In my final years, I leave my cottage on Seaglass Lane and the remainder of my savings to be used as she sees fit. She has been my anchor, and I want her to have a place on this earth that is truly her own. I did not breathe. For a moment, the words did not land. Then they did, and my heart clenched. The cottage, the savings, not to my mother, not divided equally among the grandchildren, to me. My mother's face flushed an angry red. That cannot be right, she snapped. She must have been confused. Olivia is not her only grandchild. Mr. Harlan shook his head. We updated this will after Olivia moved in to care for her, he said. Your mother was very clear. She wanted the cottage and the remainder of her estate to go to Olivia. She felt she had already helped you and Dylan financially over the years. My father shifted in his chair, looking like he wanted to slide under the table. Dylan's jaw clenched. Aaron squeezed my hand hard enough to hurt. My mother leaned forward, her voice low and intense. That girl did what any decent granddaughter would do, she said. Are you punishing the rest of us for not having medical training? My husband and I built a life with Margaret. We helped maintain that cottage. That house belongs to the family, not one person. It is still within the family, Mr. Harlan said calmly. Just not in the way you expected. When we left the office, the air between us felt brittle. My mother did not speak until we were outside. Then she turned on me, eyes blazing. You are not really going to take it, are you? She demanded. You know she was not thinking straight at the end. She was lonely. You were there. You used that to your advantage. The accusation hit me like a slap. I did not ask for anything, I said. I did not even know she changed the will. I just took care of her. My mother laughed harsh and cold. You moved in here and made yourself indispensable, she said. You and that lawyer manipulated an old woman. If you had any decency, you would sign that cottage back over to the family so we can decide together what to do with it. Maybe sell it to pay off the shop loan, help your brother get his business off the ground again. That would be the right thing. I stood on the sidewalk, the word inheritance buzzing in my ears like a wasp. I thought of my grandmother's voice of the nights we talked about the cottage, of her saying she wanted me to have a place that was mine. It is already mine, I said softly. She chose that. My mother narrowed her eyes. We will see, she said. Paperwork can change. I did not fully understand what she meant. Not then. I thought the worst she could do was guilt me, maybe try to stir up the extended family against me. I did not imagine that within a few months, there would be another set of papers on that same conference table, ones I would sign in exhausted grief, ones that would essentially erase my grandmother's last wishes and leave me excluded from the very inheritance she meant to be my protection. Grief makes you foggy. That is what the therapist would tell me later. It makes you more vulnerable to manipulation, more likely to defer to whoever sounds the most certain. In the weeks after Grandma's funeral, I moved through the cottage like a sleepwalker. Everywhere I looked, there were reminders of her. The mug with the chipped rim she used every morning. The shawl draped over the back of her favorite chair. The faded photo of my grandfather on the mantel. My leave from the clinic was ending and I needed to decide where to live. Part of me wanted to stay at the cottage forever, to sink into the rhythm of waves and seabirds and quiet. Another part of me knew there was not much work for a nurse practitioner in our little town, and that I had bills to pay. My mother showed up one morning dressed sharply, carrying a folder tucked under her arm like a weapon. We need to talk about logistics, she said, stepping over the threshold without waiting for an invitation. Property taxes, maintenance, insurance. That cottage is expensive, Olivia. Your grandmother never really understood that. I poured coffee and tried to follow her rapid-fire words. She laid out a picture where the cost of keeping the cottage seemed insurmountable. She emphasized every bill, every potential repair, every possible future emergency. You will drown in expenses, she said. You already took so much time off work. You are behind on your own life. Meanwhile, your father and I are still carrying the shop lease. Dylan's latest venture is finally about to break through, but he needs capital. The responsible thing would be to sell this place, use the money to stabilize everyone. I thought of the night sitting with Grandma while she struggled to swallow the way she had looked me in the eyes and said the cottage needed someone who really loved it. I thought of the way my mother always managed to make her needs sound like moral obligations for everyone else. I would like to think about it, I said. Talk to Mr. Harlan, see the numbers. Her expression hardened. You always were ungrateful, she said. Margaret spoiled you. She never had to raise children alone, run a business, keep a roof over everyone's head. You have no idea what that kind of pressure feels like. This is not just about you and your sentimental attachment to some old house. She pulled papers from the folder and spread them across the table. They were dense, full of legal language I did not understand. She pointed to a few highlighted sections. See, she said. If you sign here, we can transfer the cottage into a family trust. That way it is still technically yours, but we can manage it together. We could even rent it out part of the year, create a steady income. You would still be part of it, and your grandmother's name would stay on the deed alongside ours. It is a way of honoring her. I should have insisted on more time. I should have taken the papers to Mr. Harlan, to a neutral lawyer, to anyone who was not my mother. But I was tired and sad and desperately wanted some version of peace. Do you really think this is what she would want? I asked. Of course, my mother said without missing a beat. She loved all of us. She would never want her other grandchildren to be excluded. She would never want you to be tied down with all this responsibility alone. My father sat silently in the corner, eyes on the floor. Erin chewed her lip, looking back and forth between us like a referee who did not want to call a foul. Dylan breezed in halfway through the conversation, kissed my mother's cheek, and glanced at the papers. It is a good deal, Liv, he said. You know I would not steer you wrong. Family business is complicated. Better to put it all under one umbrella. Those words should have been a warning. Coming from him, they always were. But I was raw, still hearing my grandmother's last rasping breaths in my dreams. My head hurt, my chest hurt. My brain felt wrapped in cotton. I signed. Later, when a real lawyer explained it to me in clear terms, I would learn that what I had signed was not a trust that kept me equal. It was a transfer of ownership, shifting the cottage and the small savings account attached to it into a new entity controlled by my parents, with Dylan as the designated successor. My name was on the paperwork only as a witness, not as an owner. Within 6 months, the cottage was sold to a developer friend of my brother's at a suspiciously low price. Within another 6 months, that developer flipped it for nearly double the amount, making a profit my parents never saw. The bulk of the money from the original sale went into covering my mother's shop debts and Dylan's latest investment. My grandmother's savings evaporated into a fog of vague expenses. I found out about the sale from a neighbor on Seaglass Lane, who sent me a photo of a for sale sign being hammered into the sandy grass. My phone buzzed with the image while I was on my lunch break at the clinic, eating a vending machine granola bar at my desk. I called my mother in a panic. What is going on? I demanded. Why is there a sign in front of the cottage? Her voice was cool. We made a family decision, she said. You signed the papers, Olivia. You agreed. The costs were too much. This way we can all move forward. That cottage was supposed to be mine, I said, my voice breaking. Grandma wanted me to have it. You had your time there, she said. You got your closeness, your little seaside retreat. Now it is time to be practical. Do not be so dramatic. You are not being cut out of some enormous inheritance. There was barely any equity in that place, not with what it cost to take care of her. She acted like I was greedy for caring, like I was selfish for grieving the loss of the only place that had ever truly felt like home. When I asked for a breakdown of where the money went, she said I was accusing her of theft. When I suggested we loop Mr. Harlan in, she said he was old and slow and did not understand modern finance. You have a good job, she said, her favorite phrase. You can buy your own place someday. Your brother and father and I need this now. I hung up and sat at my desk, staring at the screen, my hands trembling. For the first time in my life, the stone of injustice in my chest grew too heavy to swallow. They had not just asked for help. They had taken something that was meant to be mine under the guise of a family decision, then turned it into their own lifeline without a second thought. This was not just favoritism anymore. This was theft. This was betrayal. And it would take me a long time to realize that the only way to answer that kind of betrayal was not by begging them to see me, but by going to a lawyer and asking a judge to see the truth they had tried so hard to hide. For a while, I did what I had always done. I went back to work. I paid my bills. I tried to swallow the anger by telling myself it was just money, just a house. My grandmother was gone. Nothing would bring her back. But it is hard to pretend something is fine when your nervous system knows it is not. I started having trouble sleeping. I woke in the middle of the night, heart racing, convinced I could hear waves and my grandmother calling my name. At work, I snapped at colleagues over minor things. I forgot small details which scared me. Patients trusted me. I could not afford to be foggy. I tried to talk to Erin about it on the phone one day. "Do you think what they did with the cottage was right?" I asked. "Really?" Erin was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was thin. "I do not know," she said. "I mean, you did sign the papers. Mom keeps saying you agreed that you changed your mind after the fact because you got greedy. She says Grandma never meant to exclude the rest of us, that Mr. Harlan pushed her into it." "Grandma was the most stubborn person we know," I said. "No one pushed her into anything." "I know," Erin whispered. "But if I say that out loud, Mom looks at me like I am betraying her. I am just trying to keep the peace." That phrase, "keep the peace," it was the same one my sister would use years later when she explained another betrayal. Back then it just made me tired. I went to therapy for the first time at the insistence of a coworker who had watched me cry in the break room one too many times. The therapist, a calm woman with dark curly hair and a voice like a steady tide, listened to my story. She did not rush to reassure me that everything would work out. She did not tell me to forgive and forget. "It sounds like your family uses the word family as a tool of manipulation," she said. "They say, family helps family when they want something, but they do not show up when it is your turn. They talk about loyalty, but ignore basic fairness." "It was their mother," I said. "My mother's mother. Maybe she felt more entitled. Maybe I am the selfish one clinging to a house." She shook her head. "Your grandmother made a clear choice," she said. "She left an inheritance to you specifically. Your mother and brother convinced you to sign paperwork that took that away and benefited them. That is not a misunderstanding. That is exploitation." The word sat heavy between us. Exploitation. I thought of my mother crying in the lawyer's office, accusing me of using my grandmother. I thought of Dylan's smooth voice telling me it was a good deal. I thought of all the years I had wired money without keeping track of every time they had called me selfish for hesitating. "What can I even do?" I asked. "It is already done. I signed. The cottage is gone. The money is gone. I cannot undo that." She tilted her head. "You can explore your legal options," she said. "And even if those are limited now, you can stop playing the role they assign to you. You can stop being the reliable one who always says yes." Exploring legal options sounded like something people in movies did when they were about to start a family drama worthy of a television show. I was a nurse practitioner with student loans, not some heiress fighting over a mansion. But the more I sat with it, the more the idea of doing nothing felt like a slow poison. I made an appointment with Mr. Harlan. He looked older than he had at the reading of the will, but his eyes were still sharp. "I thought you might come back," he said after I told him what had happened. "Your grandmother was very clear with me. She did not want you pressured into giving up what she left you." I showed him the papers my mother had had me sign. He read carefully, his lips pressing into a thin line. "This is not a trust that keeps you as equal owner," he said. "This effectively transferred the property and the account into a new entity controlled by your parents. There is nothing in here that protects your interest." "Did you have your own representation when you signed this?" "No," I said. "It was just my mother and father and me at the cottage. They said we were doing what Grandma would want." He sighed. "I wish you had called me first," he said. "But all is not necessarily lost. We can argue that you signed under undue influence, that there was manipulation and lack of full disclosure, and there is something else." He opened a file drawer and pulled out a thin, worn envelope. "Your grandmother asked me to keep a copy of the will in a secure place," he said. "She was worried someone might try to change her mind after she was gone. She also asked me to keep notes of our conversations about it." He handed me a stack of papers. In her careful handwriting were lines that made my eyes sting. "I know Sharon will be upset," she had written. "She has always believed everything should flow through her. But Olivia has given up time and energy to care for me. She has been treated as an endless resource for that family for years. I want her to have a place that cannot be taken from her." Reading those words felt like having her back in the room, backing me up, cutting through the fog. It was the hidden truth behind all the guilt trips, the thing my mother did not want anyone to see. Grandma knew them. She knew how they operated. She had tried to protect me. In that moment, something in me solidified. I did not care if it turned into a nightmare confrontation, if my relatives called me greedy, if the whole town whispered that I was suing my own parents over a house. I owed it to my grandmother and to myself to try. "This will not be easy," Mr. Harlan warned. "It will turn your family against you." "They already turned against me," I said. "They just expected me to keep pretending they had not." So we filed. It was not a glamorous lawsuit. There were no television cameras, no dramatic speeches, just paperwork and affidavits and a tired judge reading through years of family drama boiled down into paragraphs of legal language. My mother responded with her own stack of accusations. She painted me as an ungrateful granddaughter, said I had manipulated a frail old woman, claimed the shop and Dylan's business were vital family enterprises that deserved support. She used words like sacrifice and duty and blood. But the paper trail did not support her. Mr. Harlan had detailed notes from his meetings with Grandma. There were witnesses who had heard her talk about her decision. There was the odd timing and suspicious pricing of the sale to Dylan's friend, the quick flip for profit afterward. When we finally stood in front of the judge, my knees shaking, my parents glaring at me from across the room, I thought I might faint. My therapist's voice echoed in my head, telling me to breathe, to ground myself in the facts. The judge listened. He asked pointed questions. He read Grandma's note about not wanting me treated as an endless resource without protection. His expression shifted from neutral to something like disapproval, but it was not aimed at me. In the end, he ruled that the transfer had been made under undue influence, that my parents had breached their duty as executors of the will. He could not unwind every transaction, but he could do something. He awarded me full legal ownership of the cottage on Seaglass Lane. He ordered a lien placed on my parents' property, and on Dylan's share of the sale profits to be paid to me over time to account for some of the missing funds. He used careful, measured words, but the message was clear. My grandmother's wishes would be respected. The inheritance would not be completely stolen. The will would matter. Outside the courthouse, my mother hissed at me, her voice low and venomous. "You humiliated us," she said. "You dragged our name through the mud over a little house. You are dead to me, Olivia." Dylan leaned in, close, his eyes flat. "Enjoy your cottage," he said. "Karma is real. One day you will need us, and we will remember this." I walked away on shaking legs, clutching the folder that held the judge's order. It did not feel like a triumphant victory. It felt like something fragile and necessary, like a splint on a broken bone. I did not know that years later their prediction about needing a place to stay would come true, but the tables would turn in a way none of us expected. After the court case, my relationship with my parents and brother went from strained to nearly non-existent. My mother told anyone who would listen that I had sued her over a shack by the water. In her version, I was a vengeful daughter obsessed with revenge and family drama, determined to punish her for all the sacrifices she had made. Extended relatives took sides. Some sent me quiet messages of support. Others posted vague comments on social media about ungrateful children and today's generation. The town, like any small place, loved a scandal. I avoided Main Street for a while. The cottage once sold out from under me now belonged to me again, officially and legally. But it did not feel like a prize. It felt like a place full of ghosts and paperwork. I could not afford to quit my job and move there full-time, and I was not ready to rent it out either. So for a while it sat, cared for by a neighbor I trusted, visited by me when I could manage time off. I moved to a mid-sized city 2 hours inland and took a position in a telehealth program. The work was less physically demanding, but more emotionally draining in a different way. I listened to people talk about their chronic illnesses through screens while juggling documentation and insurance nonsense. The pay was steady. The hours were more predictable. I could breathe. For the first time, I started focusing on my own stability instead of everyone else's emergencies. I tracked my spending. I paid down debt. I took on a few extra shifts, not because my brother needed a bridge loan, but because I wanted to build a small cushion for myself. I bought a modest condo in an old brick building not far from the hospital. It was nothing like a mansion, But the first time I held the keys, I cried in the empty living room. It was not inherited. It was not tangled up with my parents' expectations. It was mine, bought with my own work and my own choices. My new neighbors became my unexpected support system. There was Mrs. Parker, a retired teacher down the hall, who adopted me with the fierce affection only older women who have seen some things can offer. She showed up at my door with casseroles and gossip. There was Malik, a single father with a gentle laugh who shared takeout with me when his son was at his ex's house. There was Carmen, a social worker who understood toxic families in a way that made me feel seen. We had our own little building community, a chosen family, forged in shared walls and hallway conversations. We had impromptu potlucks and late-night talks about parents who used guilt as currency. When Thanksgiving rolled around, I did not drive to my parents' house. I hosted dinner in my condo with my neighbors instead. We squeezed around my small table, the air full of the smell of turkey macaroni and cheese and Mrs. Parker's famous sweet potato casserole. At one point, she raised her glass. "To making our own families," she said, "and to knowing that blood is not the only thing that matters." I thought of the last Thanksgiving with my parents the year before the stroke, when my mother had spent the entire dinner complaining that Dylan's ex had not brought the grandchildren by, that no one appreciated how hard she worked, that the bridal shop was killing her. I had left that meal feeling like I had swallowed a rock. This one felt different, lighter, real. It was around that time that Erin reached out again. She had stayed with my parents through the lawsuit, living in their house, working part-time at the shop, trying to keep the peace. She had sent a short message when the judge's decision came down, saying only that she hoped I was okay. I had not answered. Now she texted to say she was in my city for a work training. She asked if I wanted to meet for coffee. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back a cautious yes. We met in a coffee shop with exposed brick and plants hanging from the ceiling. She looked older, her eyes tired, but there was a new set to her shoulders, a tension I did not recognize. "I moved out," she said after we hugged awkwardly and sat down. "I have my own apartment now. Mom says I abandoned her. She says you poisoned me." I grimaced. "That sounds familiar?" She stared into her cup. "They have not forgiven you," she said quietly. "They tell anyone who will listen that you took them to court over a little house, that you embarrassed them. But that is not why I wanted to see you." "Why then?" I asked. She took a breath. "I wanted to say, I am sorry," she said, "for not backing you up, for letting them make you the villain. I saw what was happening with the cottage. I knew it was wrong. I was just too scared to say it. I was scared of losing my home, scared of Mom's rage." Tears pricked my eyes. "Fear explains a lot," I said, "but it does not erase the hurt." "I know," she said. "I am not asking you to pretend it did not happen. I just wanted you to know that I see it now. I am in therapy too. I am trying to understand how I became the one who always smoothed things over, even when smoothing meant covering up abuse." We talked a long time about growing up in a toxic family where favoritism was disguised as love and manipulation was just called how we do things, about being groomed to be the peacekeeper, about what it meant to step out of those roles. When she left, we were not magically healed sisters, but there was a thin, fragile bridge between us. Unlike the bridge my parents offered, this one was built on honesty, not on me sacrificing my dignity to keep everyone else comfortable. My parents and Dylan did not reach out. Not after the court decision, not after I moved, not after Erin left their house. They remained a storm on the horizon, far enough away that I could almost pretend they did not exist. Almost. Because storms move. And eventually theirs hit my shoreline again with a force that knocked all of us back into each other's lives, whether we wanted it or not. It started with a voicemail from a number I did not recognize one rainy afternoon in early December. I was sitting at my desk staring at patient charts when my phone buzzed. "Ms. Carter, this is Deputy Lawson with the County Sheriff's Office," a man's voice said. "We are calling to confirm some information about the property on Seaglass Lane. Please call us back when you can." My stomach dropped. I called back immediately, my heart thudding. "Everything is fine, ma'am," he said when I reached him. "We just received a call from a woman claiming to be the homeowner, reporting a burglary in progress at that address. When we ran the property records, your name came up." "A burglary," I repeated. My mind leapt to strangers kicking in the teal door, rifling through drawers, smashing my grandmother's framed photo. "Yes, ma'am," he said. The caller identified herself as Sharon Carter. She said she lives there. The room spun for a second. I gripped the edge of my desk. "She does not live there," I said. "I do. Well, I own it. I am not there full time, but my mother absolutely does not live there." There was a pause. "Interesting," he said slowly. We responded to the call, and there were no signs of forced entry. The woman and a man who identified himself as her son were inside with several boxes and suitcases. They insisted they reside there and that someone had tried to break in earlier. When we asked for proof of residence, they could not provide any, but they said the deed must be wrong, that there was an ongoing legal dispute. "That is why I am calling you." I closed my eyes. My mother and Dylan were in my grandmother's cottage, with boxes and suitcases, claiming they lived there. My voice was steady when I spoke, but only because it had gone numb. "There is no ongoing legal dispute," I said. "A judge ruled on this. I am the only legal owner. They are not tenants. They have no right to be there." We did not want to escalate without more information, he said. They made a lot of noise about being thrown out of their family home about injustice. We asked them to provide proof of tenancy or ownership, and they said they could get it from their lawyer. But the records we see here are clear. My mind raced. How did they even get in? Then I remembered the extra key my mother had once insisted on for emergencies when Grandma was alive. We had never recovered it. "Deputy," I said slowly. "They have a history of manipulating documents and telling half-truths. I have a court order that names me as the rightful owner and outlines what happened with the will and the previous sale. I can email or fax it to you, and I can come down there." He paused. "If you can send that paperwork, it would be helpful," he said. "If you can get here today, even better." They are refusing to leave. Right now, we are just trying to keep the peace. Keep the peace. There it was again. Words that always seemed to translate to keep the loudest person happy. I hung up and went to my supervisor. She took one look at my face and waved off my attempt to explain. "Go," she said. "Take care of what you need to. We will cover your patients." I drove to the coast in a blur rain, streaking the windshield, as if the sky had decided to participate in the family drama. The cottage came into view as the gray afternoon slid toward early evening. There was a sheriff's cruiser parked out front, its lights off. My mother's car was in the sandy driveway. The teal door was open. I could see the glow of my grandmother's old lamps inside and the silhouettes of people moving around. It felt like I was approaching a crime scene in a life that used to be mine. Deputy Lawson met me by the gate. He was tall with kind eyes that did not miss much. "Ms. Carter," he asked. "Yes," I said, holding out the folder I had grabbed from my fireproof box at home. "Here is the court order, and here is the deed. Both in my name. My mother and brother do not live here. They never have. They lost their rights to this property when they tried to override my grandmother's will." He skimmed the documents quickly, his brow furrowing. "This is clear," he said. "Thank you." From inside the cottage, I heard my mother's voice. "If that is her," she said loudly, "you tell her to wipe her feet before she comes in. I just mopped these floors." I almost laughed. Of course she would be worrying about appearances. I stepped onto the porch. The familiar boards creaked under my feet. My brother appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame like he was the host of some reality show. "Well, look who decided to come home," he drawled. "Our little nurse, the big homeowner. We were just making it cozy again, the way it used to be before you turned it into a legal battlefield." Behind him, I saw boxes stacked against the wall. Suitcases, my mother's favorite armchair from their house. They had not just dropped by, they had moved in. My mother emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, as if she had not broken into a property that no longer belonged to her. She looked thinner than the last time I had seen her, the lines around her mouth etched deeper, but her eyes were just as sharp. "You took your time," she said. "We were starting to think you would not show your face." "What are you doing here?" I asked. "How did you even think this was acceptable?" She lifted her chin. "Our house was foreclosed," she said, every word heavy with accusation. "The bridal shop closed. The bank took everything. We had nowhere to go. Your father is sleeping on a friend's sofa. Your brother has been couch surfing. We are family. This cottage was always meant for the family. We are simply reclaiming what should have been ours all along. Dylan nodded. You have your little condo in the city, he said. You have your fancy job. You have your revenge. You dragged Mom into court. See where that got her. You took our safety net. Now we are taking back what is ours. It was almost impressive the way they flipped the story. In their version, my decision to enforce my grandmother's will had caused their foreclosure, had ruined their business, had led to this moment. They skipped the part where my mother refused to modernize the shop, where Dylan's endless ventures had drained money. They ignored their own choices. You cannot just move in, I said. There is a process if you need housing. There are shelters. There are relatives you have not alienated yet. This cottage is not your safety net. It is my home. My mother's face twisted. You wrestled it from your own mother's hands, she hissed. Do not stand there and pretend you are some innocent victim. You hired a lawyer and a judge to strip us of our legacy. Now you get to watch us struggle. That is what you wanted, is it not payback? No, I said. What I wanted was fairness. What I wanted was for Grandma's wishes to be respected. What I wanted was for you to stop treating me like an endless resource. This, I gestured at the boxes, is not fairness. This is trespassing. She scoffed. You would not dare, she said. No daughter calls the sheriff on her own mother. People would talk. Your patients would be horrified. What kind of person throws her family out at Christmas? Her words hit the old, soft places in me, the spot still tender from a lifetime of guilt. I felt my resolve wobble for a second. Then I remembered Grandma's letter, the judge's words, the nights I had cried in a therapist's office, trying to understand why the idea of protecting myself felt like betrayal. Deputy Lawson stepped onto the porch beside me. Mrs. Carter, he said, his tone polite but firm. We have reviewed the property records and a court order related to this address. Your daughter is the sole legal owner. You were asked to provide proof of tenancy or permission to be here, and you have not done so. We are her parents, my mother snapped. We do not need permission. Legally, ma'am, you do, he said. Family relationships do not override property rights. At this point, you and your son are unlawfully occupying this residence. We need you to gather your belongings and leave. Dylan stepped forward, fists clenched. You cannot be serious, he said. You are really going to throw us out on the street because little Miss Perfect here waved some papers around. The deputy's jaw tightened. I understand this is emotional, he said. But the law is clear. If you refuse to leave, we will have to remove you, and your daughter will be well within her rights to pursue further legal action, including protective orders. My mother turned to me, her eyes glittering with fury. You think these people care about you? She spat. That little condo crowd you eat takeout with, think they will hold your hand when you are old. You are cutting off the only real family you have over a pile of wood and sand. You will regret this. Maybe she was right about one thing. Maybe when I was old, I would look back and wonder if I should have done things differently. But in that moment, standing on the porch of the cottage, my grandmother had meant as my refuge. I knew one thing for certain. If I let them stay, if I let them bulldoze my boundaries again, there would be nothing left of me. This is not just a pile of wood and sand, I said quietly. This is the last promise Grandma made to me, and this is my line. You need to go. For a moment, no one moved. Then Erin's car pulled into the driveway. Erin got out of the car, her hair pulled into a messy bun, her face pale. She took in the sheriff's cruiser, the suitcases, the tight cluster of bodies on the porch, and her shoulders sagged. Oh God, she murmured. I was afraid of this. My mother turned on her like a striking snake. You told her, did you not? She hissed. You betrayed us. You told her we were here. Erin shook her head. No, she said. I did not have to. This is what happens when you try to steal someone's house. They find out. Dylan snorted. Listen to her, he said. She spends a few months in therapy, and suddenly she is the moral police. Erin stepped up onto the porch, her eyes on me. I told them not to come here without talking to you, she said. I told them you would not let this stand, but they kept saying you owed them, that you were only where you are because of them. My mother made a sound of disgust. Of course you take her side, she said. Ever since she dragged us into court, you have been sniffing around her, hoping she will share her blood money. I flinched. Blood money. That was one I had not heard yet. Erin's voice shook, but she did not back down. This is not about money, she said. This is about basic respect. You took her inheritance. Then when a judge told you to give it back, you decided to move in like nothing had changed. You keep saying family helps family, but what you mean is, Olivia helps everyone and no one helps her. The deputy looked between us, clearly trying to balance patience with the need to get things moving. "Ma'am," he said to my mother again, "you need to start packing. You are already trespassing. Do not make this worse." My mother stared at me, her eyes full of something that had been building for years. Resentment. "You want a show," she said. "Fine. Let the neighbors see. Let the sheriff see. Let your precious judge and lawyer hear about how the big city nurse kicked her own mother out on Christmas. Maybe they will applaud. Maybe this is the revenge you always dreamed of." "This is not about revenge," I said softly. "This is about not letting you rewrite the story again." She was not listening. She stomped inside, yanking things off shelves, dragging suitcases into the hallway. Dylan followed, muttering under his breath. Erin stayed on the porch beside me, her hands shaking. "I am so sorry," she whispered. "They lost the house. The shop closed. Dylan's last sure thing crashed. They have been talking about the cottage for months. Mom kept saying the judge's order was temporary, that she was going to challenge the will again. I tried to tell her that is not how it works, but she would not hear it. The foreclosure is not my fault," I said. "The shop failed because she refused to change. Dylan's ventures fail because he refuses to grow up. But I know they will blame me." Erin nodded, tears spilling over. "They already do," she said. "At Thanksgiving, Mom told everyone you cursed the family, that your lawsuit brought bad karma. She said Grandma would be ashamed of you." The irony almost made me laugh. Grandma, who had written that she did not want me treated as an endless resource, ashamed of me for finally drawing a line. The deputy stepped outside again. "We are going to give them a few more minutes," he said. "Then we need to clear the house. Ms. Carter is there. Anyone you would like here with you?" A friend. Another witness. I thought of the old pattern handle, "It alone hold everything together." Then I thought of my neighbors, of Mrs. Parker, who would absolutely drive down here in a heartbeat with a bag of snacks and a folding chair to watch the show. Of Carmen, who always said documentation was salvation when dealing with toxic families. "I will call someone," I said. I dialed Carmen. She answered on the second ring. "Hey, Liv," she said. "Everything okay? You sound weird." I told her in clipped, tight sentences what was happening. She swore under her breath. "Do you want me there?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Please." She arrived as my mother and brother were dragging the last of their things toward the door. My mother shot her a look of pure contempt. "Who is this?" she demanded. "A friend," I said. "A social worker, someone who understands boundaries." Carmen raised a hand in a little wave. "Evening," she said. "Rough night, huh?" My mother ignored her, focusing on me. She stood in the doorway, one suitcase at her feet, her hand on the frame like she was staking a claim. "This is not over," she said. "You think you have won because a judge signed a paper, but judges retire, lawyers die, houses fall into disrepair. One day when your condo needs a new roof and your little company starts laying people off, you will remember that we are the only ones who share your blood. And we will remember this." "I know," I said. "That is exactly why I'm doing this." For a moment, something like hurt flickered across her face. Then it hardened again. She hauled the suitcase down the porch steps and stalked toward the car. Dylan followed, shoulders stiff. They loaded their things in silence. Erin watched them go, her hands twisted together. "Where will you stay?" she called after them. My mother did not answer. Dylan yelled over his shoulder, "We will figure it out. We always do. Unlike some people, we are survivors." The car door slammed. The engine roared. They sped away, leaving tire marks in the sandy driveway. The silence that followed was thick. Deputy Lawson exhaled. "I am sorry it came to this," he said. "But you did the right thing. If they come back without your permission, call us immediately. Given the court history, you might want to talk to your lawyer about a restraining order." "I will," I said. After he left, Carmen and Erin and I stood in the living room of the cottage my grandmother had once filled with laughter and cornbread. It felt different now, like a stage after the actors have stormed off. "I feel sick," Erin said. "Like I just watched a car crash in slow motion." "You did," Carmen said gently. "But your sister did not cause it. She just refused to stand in front of the car this time." We spent the next few hours checking locks, taking photos of the rooms, making sure nothing had been damaged beyond repair. My mother had rearranged furniture, put her things in Grandma's drawers, hung a few of her own pictures on the walls. It was eerie, like she had tried to overwrite my grandmother's life with her own. We found a stack of unopened mail on the table, including a notice about the foreclosure of my parents' house and a brochure about senior housing options. There was also a printed email from a lawyer whose name I did not recognize, warning my mother that any further attempts to challenge the will would be denied. They knew, I said quietly. They knew they had no legal standing. They came anyway. Yes, Carmen said. Because they assumed you would not enforce your boundaries. Their whole system depends on you being more concerned about looking like a good daughter than being a healthy adult. In the middle of the night, when Erin had gone back to her apartment and Carmen had curled up on the pull-out sofa, I lay in my grandmother's bed and stared at the ceiling. I thought about every time my mother had said family helps family while reaching for my wallet. I thought about the way she had dangled love in front of me like a prize for good behavior. I thought about the judge's face when he ruled in my favor, the deputy's steady voice on the porch, my grandmother's handwriting in that note about not wanting me to be an endless resource. I felt grief, yes, but I also felt something else, something that felt a little like peace. Not the kind of peace Erin had tried to maintain by smoothing over every explosion, but a deeper kind. The kind that comes when you finally say enough and mean it. The weeks that followed were strangely quiet. My mother and Dylan did not call. They did not show up at my condo. They did not leave screaming voicemails. Instead, they did what they do best. They told their story to anyone who would listen. I heard through the grapevine that they were staying with an aunt 3 towns over, sleeping in her basement, and complaining about the injustice of it all. My mother told the church ladies that I had thrown her out onto the street in the dead of winter. Dylan told old drinking buddies that I had stolen his inheritance and then kicked him out of the family home. They used words like injustice and betrayal, but they never mentioned the will. They never mentioned the foreclosure that had nothing to do with me. They never mentioned the judge or the lawyer or the sheriff on the porch. I went back to my life in the city. I went back to my patients and my charts, to Mrs. Parker's knock on my door with leftovers, to Malik's kid showing me his latest drawing, to Carmen's dry jokes about family karma. The condo felt smaller after the wide openness of the cottage, but it also felt safe. Through it all, I stayed in touch with Erin. She called sometimes late at night just to talk. "Mom says you are going to die alone," she said once, half laughing, half crying. "She says your chosen family will disappear the minute you stop being useful." "Maybe she is projecting," I said. "She is the one who lost her house and her shop because she refused to adapt." Erin sighed. "She cannot see that," she said. "In her mind, everything bad that has ever happened is someone else's fault, usually yours." I asked Erin if she wanted to spend Christmas at the cottage with me and some friends. She hesitated, then said yes. It would be her first major holiday away from our parents. We invited Carmen and Malik and Mrs. Parker. We cooked too much food and strung lights around the porch. We set an extra place at the table with my grandmother's favorite blue plate, not because we believed in ghosts, but because it felt right. During dinner, as the ocean murmured outside and the house glowed warm against the cold, Mrs. Parker raised her glass. "To Olivia," she said, "for finally understanding that revenge does not have to look like destruction. Sometimes the sweetest revenge is just building a life where you are no longer at the mercy of people who would rather see you broken than free." I felt my throat tighten. "This does not feel like revenge," I said. "It feels like survival." "Those two things are not opposites," Carmen said. "When you survive a toxic family and still manage to be kind, that is a form of payback all its own. They wanted you bitter, small, desperate to be let back in. Instead, you are here in your own home, surrounded by people who love you without conditions." The tables turned, even if they will never admit it. Later, Erin and I stood on the porch wrapped in blankets watching the stars. "Do you ever miss them?" she asked. I thought about it. "I miss the idea of them," I said. "I miss the fantasy that we could all sit around a table and have a Christmas or a Thanksgiving dinner without someone exploding, without someone bringing up money or inheritance or who did more. I miss the mother I wished I had, the brother I pretended I had." Erin nodded. "Me too," she said. But when I actually imagine being in a room with them again, I feel my chest tighten. That is your body telling you the truth, I said. You do not have to ignore it anymore. We talked about plans for the future. She wanted to go back to school, maybe become a therapist herself. I wanted to take a break from constant crisis mode and maybe learn how to have hobbies that were not just help everyone else. We talked about the possibility of one day using the cottage for retreats, a sanctuary for women who had survived toxic families and needed a place to remember what safety felt like. It was just a dream, a soft outline. But it was ours, not something handed down with strings attached. In therapy, I unpacked the guilt that still clung to me like a film. The therapist reminded me that boundaries are not walls built out of spite. They are fences with gates you control. You did not kick your mother and brother out of their home, she said. You asked them to leave yours. You did not take anything from them that they had a right to. You simply stopped letting them take from you. Slowly, the word daughter began to mean something different in my mind. Not everlasting caretaker, not family bank, not quiet one who absorbs all the chaos. Just a person with a complex history and the right to decide how much of that history she wanted in her present. And revenge, that big dramatic word that people like to throw around, settled into something quieter in my vocabulary. Not a plot to ruin anyone's life, not a scheme worthy of a courtroom thriller. My revenge was a life where my mother's choices no longer dictated my housing, my finances, or my sense of worth. My revenge was sleeping through the night, without jumping at every phone notification, wondering whose emergency I needed to fix. My revenge was sitting at my own table on Christmas in a cottage my grandmother had loved, surrounded by people who showed up with dishes and stories instead of demands and accusations. That did not mean the story ended neatly. It just meant I was no longer letting someone else write the ending for me. When I tell this story now, people sometimes look at me with the same mix of shock and recognition I saw on the deputy's face on that porch. You sued your own mother over a will, they ask. You had the sheriff clear your brother out of your grandmother's cottage on Christmas Eve? Yes, I say I did. They lean in hungry for the juicy details, the family drama, the betrayal. Some are waiting for the gotcha moment, the part where I confess I went too far, that I regret the revenge. Others are secretly wondering if they would have the courage to do something similar in their own tangled families, where inheritance and favoritism and toxic patterns have been brewing for decades. Here is what I tell them, especially the women, especially the ones my age and older, who have spent their lives being the reliable one, the steady one, the one everyone calls when the car breaks down, or the rent is due, or the family business needs a bailout. If a stranger broke into your home, refused to leave, tried to change the locks and tell everyone it was their house, now you would not hesitate to call for help. You would not stand in the doorway, wringing your hands, worrying about what the neighbors would think. You would pick up the phone and dial. You would expect a judge or a sheriff or a lawyer to take you seriously. But when it is our parents, our sister, our brother, our own flesh and blood, we hesitate. We tell ourselves we are overreacting. We worry more about their reputation than our safety. We let them frame their exploitation as duty, their manipulation as love. I am not saying every family disagreement belongs in a courtroom. I am not saying every conflict over a will or a wedding or a Christmas dinner requires a judge. But I am saying this: your peace, your home, your financial stability, your mental health are worth more than the illusion of harmony with people who are willing to burn your life down to keep theirs comfortable. There was a time when I believed that family meant absorbing every blow, that being a good daughter meant letting myself be used. There was a time when my entire self-worth was tied to how useful I was to my parents and brother. There was a time when I thought the only kind of revenge that counted was the dramatic kind, the big confrontation at a Thanksgiving dinner, the public showdown at a wedding rehearsal. Now I know that sometimes the most powerful revenge is simply refusing to participate in the game anymore. My grandmother's cottage still stands on Seaglass Lane. The teal door needs fresh paint, and the porch steps creak more than they used to. The inside is different now. The room my mother tried to claim has become a library filled with books, a soft chair by the window, and plants that thrive in the sea light. The kitchen table has seen more laughter in the past few years than it did in the decade before she died. I host small gatherings there when I can. Friends, neighbors, sometimes even strangers who find their way to me through someone who has heard my story. Women in their 50s and 60s and 70s who have spent entire lives being told that their job is to give and never ask for anything back. We sit on the porch with coffee or wine and talk about wills and secrets and favoritism and the kind of toxic family manipulation that leaves you feeling small no matter how big your actual life becomes. We talk about the inheritance battles that tore siblings apart, the weddings where someone's mother staged a scene, the Christmas dinners where someone was excluded because they finally said no. We also talk about the quiet triumphs, the first time someone said, "I cannot do that," and did not apologize. The first promotion someone celebrated without waiting for their parents' approval. The first time someone chose a birthday trip with friends over a draining family gathering and did not explain themselves. If you are listening to this and seeing yourself in any part of my story, I want you to know you are not alone. You are not crazy for feeling like something is wrong when everyone else tells you to keep the peace. You are not selfish for wanting fairness in inheritance, in how wills are honored, in how care is recognized. You are not vindictive for wanting some form of payback when the tables finally turn and the people who used you need something from you again. You are allowed to set boundaries with your parents, your sister, your brother. You are allowed to say no when someone tries to manipulate you with phrases like, "family helps family," while ignoring your own needs. You are allowed to call a lawyer when someone steals what was meant for you. You are allowed to call the sheriff when someone refuses to leave your home, even if that someone shares your DNA. That is not betrayal, that is self-respect. If any part of my journey resonates with you, I would truly appreciate it if you took a moment to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It helps this little corner of the internet reach more women who need to hear that they are not crazy, not alone, and not obligated to sacrifice themselves on the altar of someone else's comfort. And I genuinely want to hear from you. Have you ever had to draw a hard line with your family? Have you had a parent threaten to rewrite a will, a sibling try to cut you out of an inheritance, relatives who treated you like a credit card instead of a person? Have you ever walked away from a Thanksgiving dinner, a Christmas gathering, a wedding, or a family business rather than keep tolerating injustice? Share your story in the comments. You never know who might need to read it tonight. Because in the end, revenge in my world does not look like ruining someone's life. It looks like refusing to let them ruin mine. It looks like sitting at my grandmother's table in a cottage by the sea, surrounded by a chosen family that shows up with casseroles and kindness instead of demands and accusations. It looks like knowing deep in my bones that the inheritance I protect most fiercely now is not a house or a savings account. It is my own peace,